name is Philip Duncan. I am the Dean of Academics here at Colby Academy and Trinity Prep, filling in for Mr. John Bertolini, our headmaster, who speaks better than I do, but so you'll have to bear with me for a couple minutes. Again, thank you for being here this evening. Thank you for our readers as well who were here early practicing. I was very excited to have this opportunity to discuss this here. Obviously, especially today, the question of what is love is very important. And it seems to me we often skip over in our debates in our country and in our day defining terms, the first step to having a meaningful argument. And so today we spend this discussion, this dialogue, and then our discussion after working on the effort to define that term of what is love. I think especially today that's a very meaningful thing to do. So firstly, I'd like to introduce His Excellency Archbishop Corleone, Archbishop of San Francisco.
Good evening, and welcome again, and thank you all for being here for this stage reading of Plato, What is Love? Yes, a very important and timely topic. This is one of the events we sponsor with our Benedict XVI Institute that has this twofold mission. Yes, it's to assist parishes with their liturgies to be more reverent and beautiful, but also this re-energizing the Catholic culture of the arts. You know, the Church has always been the great patron of the arts. It's championed that cause. And whenever I talk to artists in all fields of art, by the way, so that includes literature, philosophy, and poetry, which is what we're about tonight, they lament this sort of retreat of the Church from being a patron of the arts. We should reclaim that. We know in our going back to, well, our Greek philosophical roots, very appropriate, we're reading the Greek philosopher tonight, about three aspects of our human nature that is most ennobling is truth, beauty, and goodness. And these are kind of normal virtues within us that, with the help of God's grace, can lift the soul up to God. So we're trying to exalt with our Benedict XVI Institute the aspect of beauty, which seems to me to have been the most neglected of the three over these last 50 or 60 years. So I'm very excited about a lot of great initiatives we've taken already. This is another one, and so I'm very appreciative of you being here to partake of this. And I would like to introduce our executive director, who really is the one who makes this all happen. I think of crazy ideas and she figures out how to make it happen. Quite a lot of merit in that. So Maggie Gallagher, our executive director.
Wonderful to be here, and thank you to Phil and Colby Trinity. You know, we know that we have here an audience that understands truth, goodness, and beauty, and its significance in the human soul and the life of the Church. I'm going to get out of the way pretty fast, except to say I'm going to be back August 17th at St. Apollinaris, and I'll tell you more about whether there's truth and beauty. And we're talking about bringing Father Paul Murray, who wrote this book called God's Spies, Michelangelo, Shakespeare, and Other Poets of Vision, from Rome. He's coming out to LA to do Bishop Barron's show, and he's agreed to come up to help with the Benedict XVI Institute. And so we're working on doing something up here in Napa in mid-September. It's not yet arranged. What are we doing here? Okay. We think now of philosophy as an academic subject to be learned by very learned people in dusty rooms in ivy towers. And thank God for all of those scholars who are doing that work. But that's not how Plato thought about what he was doing. The Symposium is really interesting, not only because the topic is interesting, what is love, but because Plato wrote about real characters, right? A great general, Agathon, the greatest player, the most famous playwright, arguably, Aristophanes. His cousin's stepbrother is featured here, Phaedrus. And it's probably based on something that really did happen. So for Plato, philosophy, and for Socrates, philosophy was not something that experts did, right? And it was really abstruse and hard. It was about the burning questions of life that we all face. And I will just tell you this, I'm really thrilled. This is only the second time we've done this, so you're an experimental audience, but you're not just an audience, you're a participant. We do this without professional actors because we are not staging a production. We are reenacting a philosophical drama that probably took place. And in my next life, or maybe in a few years, I'd love to do a staged version. This is my fantasy I'll share with you, where you start with the actors in togas, and they do, what we did here is basically we updated the language of Jowett's translation, edited it for length, but not for meaning or content, and cut out the whole last half, which is, I like to describe as, and I'm probably not doing Plato justice, a bunch of drunken Greeks talking about how much they want to have sex with Socrates. And what remains is the heart of the experience of the dinner party as a vehicle for thought about the most pressing questions. And I invite you to experience it in this new way, the way Plato would have heard it, out loud, not in the academy, and to think of yourselves as equal actors in this drama. Because fundamentally, one of the things we believe at the Benedict XVI Institute is the barrier between the expert, when the expert gets in between the audience and the artist, or in this case, the philosopher, something has gone wrong with the model. It's not that we don't love experts, but if people feel they're not entitled to an opinion unless they've spent 8 years in a dusty room reading this and related books, there's something wrong, because these are the most important questions in life, and every human being has to answer them in some form, and with the help, hopefully, of the church, but never alone. So here we are together doing something incredibly meaningful in the search for meaning, truth, goodness, and beauty, and we're doing it together. And so I thank you. And without ado, we present Plato's Symposium.
Fresh from the bath and sandals on too. Where are you going, my dear Socrates? Do you become such a beau?
To a banquet at Agathon's. I have put on my finery because he is such a fine man. Why don't you come along with me?
As it is you who has asked me, I will.
Follow, follow, and let us demolish the proverb, to the feasts of inferior men the good unbidden go. Instead, our proverb will say, to the feasts of the good unbidden go.
I am rather afraid, Socrates, that like Menelaus and Homer, I shall be the inferior person who, to the feast of the wise unbidden goes. But I shall say that I was bidden by you, and then you will have to make an excuse for me. So we are two going together. Socrates?
Go on, good doctor. Be a good doctor and good fellow too, and go on without me.
Welcome, Aristodemus. What have you done with Socrates?
He was with me a moment ago, but I came by his invitation to your supper.
You were quite right in coming. But where is he? Boy, go look for him.
Socrates snuck behind the doorway of the neighbor's house, and when I call, he doesn't move.
Call him again, then.
Socrates!
Let him be. He does this. Stops anywhere, losing himself without any reason. He will soon appear.
Well, if you think so, let us have supper. Serve up whatever you like. For if there is no one here to give you orders, tonight, imagine that you are our hosts, and that I and the company are your guests. Treat us well, and we will applaud you. Sit next to me, Socrates, that I may touch you and so have the benefit of that wise thought which came into your mind in the portico, and you now possess.
Oh, that wisdom could be infused by touch, run like a pitcher of wine out of the fuller into the emptier man. How greatly should I value the privilege of sitting by your side, Agathon. You would fill me with a stream of wisdom, plenteous and fair, whereas my own is of a very mean and questionable sort. Why, yours burst forth in all the splendor of youth just the day before yesterday in front of more than 30,000 Greeks.
You mock me, Socrates. Dionysus, the god of wine, shall later be the judge. But at present, you'd better attack that supper.
Drinking again? I haven't yet recovered from yesterday's potations, and I suspect that most of you are in the same spot.
Yeah, by all means, let's not drown in drink 2 nights in a row.
Just one question before I vote. Is Agathon able to drink hard?
I am not equal to it.
Then what hope is there for weak heads like myself? We are agreed. Drinking is to be voluntary, no compulsion. Next, I move that the flute girl be told to go away and play to herself, or if she likes the women. Today, let's have conversation.
What shall we talk about?
Phaedrus recently told me, very indignantly, what a strange thing it is at Olympus, that whereas other gods have poems and hymns made in their honor, the great and glorious god Love has no praiser among all the poets. Even the utility of salt has been made the theme of an eloquent philosophical discourse. And yet to this day, no one has ever dared to hymn Love's praises. Tonight, let's honor the god Love. Each of us in turn, going from left to right, shall make a speech in honor of Love. And Phaedrus, because he is sitting first on the left hand, and because he is the father of thought, shall begin.
How can I say no? Since love is the one thing that I, who always profess to know nothing, do understand. Let Phaedrus begin, and good luck to him.
Love is a mighty and wonderful God, but especially in his birth, for he is the eldest, as Hesiod says. First chaos came, and then broad-bosomed earth, the everlasting seat of all that is, and then love. Or hear Parmenides saying, first in the train of gods he fashioned love. Not only is love the eldest, he is also the source of our greatest benefits. For I know no greater blessing to a young man starting in life than a virtuous lover, or to a lover than a beloved youth. For what else implants the noble principles which ought to guide of men who would live nobly? Neither family, nor honor, nor wealth, nor any other motive so well as love. Consider, a lover who is detected in doing any dishonorable act will be more pained at being glimpsed by his beloved than by his father or his friends or anyone else. If we could only contrive that a state or an army should be made up of lovers and their loves, they would overcome the world. What lover would not rather die 1,000 deaths than to be seen by his beloved abandoning his post? The worst coward would become an inspired hero at such a time. Love would inspire him. For love, men dare to die for their beloved, and women as well as men. Alcestis is a monument to all Greece, for she was willing to lay down her life for her husband, when no one else would, although he had a father and mother living. So noble did Alcestis' act seem to the gods, they granted her the privilege of returning alive to earth. So do the gods honor true love. Friends also love. Achilles knew he could return home and live to a good old age if he abstained from slaying Hector. Nevertheless, he gave his life to revenge his friend. He dared to die. And so the gods honored him even above Alcestis and sent him to the islands of the blessed. And so, friends, admit it. I have proven that love is the eldest, the noblest, and mightiest of the gods, and the chiefest giver of virtue in life and of happiness after death. Your turn, Pausanias.
Phaedrus, don't praise love in such an indiscriminate manner. There are more loves than one. Which love is deserving of the praise you give? For love is inseparable from Aphrodite. And if there were only one Aphrodite, there would be only one love. But as there are 2 goddesses, there must be 2 loves. The elder one, having no mother, is called the heavenly Aphrodite, the daughter of Uranus. The younger, the daughter of Zeus and Dione. This Aphrodite we call common, and the love inflamed by her is rightly named common. Now we judge actions differently depending on the manner in which they are performed. Take what we are doing: drinking, singing, talking. These acts are not in themselves either good or evil, but they turn out in this way or that way according to how we perform them. When well done, they are good, and when wrongly done, they are evil. In like manner, not every love, but only that which has a noble purpose, is noble and worthy of praise. The love, who is the offspring of the common Aphrodite, is common, and has no discrimination, being such as the meaner sort of men feel. They are apt to love women as well as of youths, indiscriminately. It is a love that is of the body rather than of the soul. But the children of the heavenly Aphrodite have nothing of wantonness. Those who are inspired by this love turn to the male, delighting in the more valiant and intelligent nature. For they love not boys, but intelligent beings whose reason is beginning to develop, about the time their beard. And they mean to be faithful to these young men, not to take them in their inexperience and deceive them and play the fool with them. The law should forbid love of young boys because their nature is uncertain. They may turn out good or bad, and much noble enthusiasm may be thrown away upon them. The coarser sort of lovers ought not to be restrained by force. As we attempt to restrain them from seducing women of free birth, or ought to be restrained, as we attempt to restrain them from seducing women of free birth, these bring reproach on love. In our city, the rules about love are perplexing. But in most cities, they're simple and very straightforward. The law is simply in favor of these connections with teenage boys, and no one, whether young or old, has anything to say to their discredit. I suppose there are men of few words in those other Greek cities, and therefore the lovers do not like the trouble of pleading their suit. But in Ionia, and generally in countries ruled by barbarians, love of youth is considered dishonorable, just like philosophy and gymnastics. Barbarian rulers keep their subjects poor in spirit without the strong bonds of friendship or society which love inspires. Thus, the disrepute of the love of teen men in barbarian lands is due to the evil conditions that prevail in these societies, to the self-seeking of the rulers and the cowardice of the ruled. On the other hand, the indiscriminate honor which is given to love in some Greek city-states is attributable to the laziness of those who lack the energy to pursue noble loves. In our own land, it would be far better if somewhat paradoxical principle prevails. Open loves are seen as more honorable than secret ones, and the love of the noble and highest, even if their persons are less beautiful than others, is especially honorable to us. All the world encourages the lover, and if he succeeds, he is praised. In the pursuit of love, our custom allows him to do many things, which philosophy would bitterly censure if they were done from any other motive. He may pray, entreat, supplicate, and swear, lie on the mat before the beloved's door, and endure a slavery worse than that of any slave. And no friend will be ashamed of him and admonish him, and no enemy will charge him with meanness or flattery. And yet, here's the perplexing thing. Parents often forbid their sons to talk with their lovers, and the elders refuse to rebuke critics of these sons. Anyone who reflects on all this will, on the contrary, think that we hold these practices to be most distasteful. But the truth, as I imagine, is not a simple question. They are honorable to him who follows them honorably, dishonorable to him who follows them dishonorably. There is dishonor in yielding to the evil in an evil manner, but there is honor in yielding to the good in an honorable. Evil is the vulgar lover who loves the body rather than the soul. He loves a thing which is unstable. When the bloom of youth vanishes, the vulgar lover takes wings and flies away, in spite of all his words and promises. But the love of the noble is lifelong, for the lover unites himself with what is everlasting. This is why a hasty attachment is considered dishonorable, because time is the true test of love. Secondly, it is dishonorable to be seduced by the love of money or of wealth or of political power. For none of these things are of a lasting nature, and no generous friendship ever sprang from them. For the beloved, there is only one way to succumb to the lover, the way of virtue. To accept another for the sake of virtue is noble. This is that love which is the love of the heavenly gods, making the lover and the beloved alike eager in the work of their own improvement. To you, faithless, I offer this my contribution in praise of love, which is as good as I could make on the spur of the moment.
Aristophanes is next.
Not me. The doctor.
I will speak in your turn, and you speak in mine. While I'm speaking, I recommend you to hold your breath. And if after it is no better, gargle with water. If it still continues, tickle your nose and sneeze. If you sneeze once or twice, even the most violent is sure to go. Pausanias, your beginning is fair, but your ending is lame. The principle of double love is not merely an affection of the soul towards the beautiful, but as medicine shows is to be found in the bodies of all animals and in productions of the earth. Love's empire extends over all things, divine as well as human. There are in the human body two kinds of love. The desire of the healthy is one, and the desire of the diseased is another. As Pausanias was just now saying, that to indulge good men is honorable, and bad men dishonorable, so too in the body. The good and healthy elements are to be indulged, and the bad elements and the elements of disease are not to be indulged, but discouraged. For medicine is simply the knowledge of the loves and desires of the body, and how to satisfy them or not. The best physician is he who is able to separate fair love from foul, or to convert one into another. It is not just the human body. Anyone who pays the least attention to the subject will also perceive that in music there is the same reconciliation of opposites. Harmony is composed of differing notes of higher or lower pitch, which disagreed once but are now reconciled by the musician. For if the higher and lower notes are still disagreed, there can be no harmony, right?
By the gods, only a fool could disagree.
So too, rhythm is compounded of elements short and long, differing and now in accord. Think about it. Music makes love and unison to grow up among opposites, and thus music too is concerned with the principles of love. In music, in medicine, and all other things human as well as divine, both loves ought to be noted as far as may be, for they are both present. The course of the seasons is also full of these principles, when the elements of hot and cold, moist and dry, blend in temperance and harmony. They bring to men, animals, and plants health and plenty. Whereas the wanton love is destructive and injurious, being the source of pestilence, and bringing many other kinds of diseases on animals and plants. For hoarfrost and hail and blight spring from the excesses and disorders of these elements of love. And so the love, which is concerned with the good, and which is perfected in company with temperance and justice, has the greatest power, and is the source of all our happiness and harmony, and makes us friends with the gods who are above us and with one another. I dare say that I have omitted several things which might be said in praise of love, but not on purpose. You, Aristophanes, may not fill in my blanks, or commend love in some other way, or I see your pictures are here.
Yes, yeah, not until I sneeze. And you know, it makes me wonder whether the harmony of the body has a love of, you know, tickling. For no sooner did I did that than I was cured.
Beware, friend Aristophanes. You are making fun of me. I shall have to watch and see whether I cannot have a return laugh at your expense.
Okay, I take it back. I reckon I have to praise love in another way, unlike either Pausanias or Examinus. Mankind, judging by their neglect of him, have never at all understood the power of love. For if they had understood him, they would surely have built noble temples and altars, and offered solemn sacrifices in his honor, since of all the gods he is the best friend of men, the helper and healer of the ills which are the great impediment to the happiness of the race. Let me try to describe his power to you. The original human nature was not like the present. The sexes were not two, as they are now, but originally three: man, woman, and the union of those two, which is called the androgynous. The primeval man was round, his back and sides forming a circle, and he had 4 hands and 4 feet, 1 head, with 2 faces looking opposite ways, set on a round neck and precisely alike. Also 4 ears, 2 naughty bits, and so forth. He could walk upright as men now do, backwards or forwards as he pleased, and he could roll over and over at a great pace, turning on his 4 hands and 4 feet, 8 in all, like tumblers going over and over with their legs in the air when he wanted to run fast. Terrible was their might and strength, and the thoughts of their hearts were great, and they made an attack upon the gods. Doubt reigned in the celestial councils. Should they kill them and annihilate the race with thunderbolts, as they had done the giants? But then there would be an end to the sacrifices and worship which men offered to them. On the other hand, the gods could not suffer their insolence to be unrestrained. At last, after a good deal of reflection, Zeus said, I have a plan to humble their pride and improve their manners. I will cut them in 2, and then they will be diminished in strength and increased in numbers, making them more profitable to us. They shall walk upright on 2 legs, and if they continue insolent and will not be quiet, I'll split them again and they'll hop around on 1 leg. After this division, the 2 parts of man, full of desire for his other half, came together. They threw their arms around one another, entwined in mutual embraces, longing to grow into one. Humans were on the point of dying from hunger and self-neglect because they did not like to do anything apart. They were being destroyed when Zeus, in pity of them, invented a new plan. He turned their naughty bits round to the front, for this had not always been their position, and they sowed the seed no longer like they had, like frogs in a pond, but in one another. After that, the male, in the female, in order that by the mutual embraces of man and woman they might breed and the race might continue, or if man came to man, they might be satisfied and rest and go their ways to the business of life. This is our ancient desire of one another implanted in us, reuniting our original nature, making one of two, and healing the state of man. Each of us is always looking for his other half. Men who are a section of that double nature, which was once called androgynous, are lovers of women. Swingers are like this, whether they're men or women, while those originally of the female nature do not care for men, but have female friends with benefits. But they who are a section of the male follow the male, and while they are young, being slices of the original man, they hang about men and embrace them, and they are themselves the best of boys and youths because they have the most manly nature. Some indeed assert that they are shameless, but this is not true, for they do not act thus from any want of shame, but because they are valiant and manly and have a manly countenance, and they embrace that which is like them. And these, when they grow up, become our politicians. And only these, which proves my point if you think about it. When they reach manhood, they are lovers of youth and are not naturally inclined to marry or beget children. If they do so only in obedience to the law, but they are satisfied if they may be allowed to live with one another unwedded. And such a nature is prone to love and ready to return love, always embracing that which is akin to them. And when one of them meets with his other half, the actual half of himself, whether he be a lover of youth or a lover of another sort, the pair are lost in an amazement of love and friendship and intimacy, and one will not be out of the other's sight even for a moment. These are the people who pass their whole lives together, yet they could not explain what they desire of one another. For the intense yearning which each of them has towards the other, does not appear to be the desire of just thingy, but of something else, which the soul of either evidently desires and cannot tell, and of which she has only a dark and doubtful presentiment. If Hephaestus, god of fire, forges, and sculpture, came to the pair who are lying side by side and asked them, "What do you people want of one another?" they would be unable to explain. If he asked the pair, "Do you desire to be wholly one, always day and night to be in one another's company? For if this is what you desire, I am ready to melt you into one and let you grow together, so that being two you shall become one, and after your death in the world below still be one departed soul instead of two." Is that what's troubling you, friend? There's not a man among them who would not agree. This meeting and melting into one another, this becoming one instead of two, is the very expression of his ancient need. And the reason is that human nature was originally one, and we were a whole, and the desire and pursuit of the whole is called love. There was a time, like I said, when we were one, but now because of the wickedness of mankind, God has dispersed us. And if we are not obedient to the gods, there's a danger we'll be split up again and go about like the reliefs on the temple friezes or the Egyptian tomb paintings. Call all men to piety, that we may avoid evil and obtain the good, which love is just the Lord and minister. For if we are friends of the God and at peace with him, we shall find our own true loves, which rarely happens in this world at present. No, I'm serious. I must beg Eryximachus not to make fun or to find any allusion in what I am saying to Pausanias and Agathon, who, as I suspect, are both of the manly nature. But my words include men and women everywhere. If our loves were perfectly accomplished, then our race would be happy. This, Eryximachus, is my discourse on love, which, although different from yours, I must beg you to leave unassailed by the shafts of your wit, in order that each may have his turn. Or rather, since Agathon and Socrates are the only ones left, either.
Indeed, I am not going to attack you. It was a charming conceit. If I didn't know that Agathon and Socrates are masters in the art of love, I should be really afraid that they would have nothing to say after the world of things which have been said already.
You played your part well, Arsenius. But if you were as I am now, or rather as I shall be when Agathon has spoken, you would indeed be in a great strait.
You want to cast a spell over me, Socrates, in the hope that I may be disconcerted at the audience's raised expectation that I will speak well.
I should be strangely forgetful, Agathon, of the courage and magnanimity which you showed facing the vast theater of the 30,000 altogether undismayed, if I thought that your nerves could be fluttered at a small party of friends.
Do you think, Socrates, that my head is so full of the theater as not to know much more formidable a man of sense, a few good judges are, than many fools?
No, but then we, having been a part of the foolish many in the theater, cannot be regarded as the select wise. Though I know that if you chanced to be in the presence of some really wise man, you would be ashamed of disgracing yourself before him, would you not?
Yes.
But before the many, you would not be ashamed if you thought that you were doing something disgraceful in their presence?
Do not answer, my dear Agathon. For if he can only get a partner with whom he can talk, especially a good-looking one, he will no longer care about the completion of our plan. When you and he have paid your tribute to the god, then you may talk.
Instead of praising the god love, the previous speakers appear to have congratulated mankind on the benefits which love confers upon them. But I would rather praise the god first and then speak of the gifts. May I say without impiety that of all the blessed gods, he is the most blessed because he is the fairest and the best. Many things were said by Phaedrus about love in which I agree with him, but I cannot agree that he is older than Ippotas Cronus. Not so. I maintain him to be the youngest of the gods, and youthful forever. Of truth, love is the tenderest as well as the youngest, and also he is of flexible form. For if he were hard and without flexure, he could not enfold all things, or wind his way into and out of every human soul of man undiscovered. Love's greatest glory is that he can neither do nor suffer wrong to or from any god or any man. For if he suffers, it is not by force. Force comes not near him. Neither when love acts does he act by force. For all men in all things serve love of their own free will. For there is voluntary agreement, as the laws which are the lords of the city say, is justice. And not only is love just, but exceedingly temperate. For temperance is the acknowledged ruler of the pleasures and desires, and no pleasure ever masters love. He is their master, and they are his servants. As to courage, even the god of war is no match for him. He is the captive, and love is the Lord. For love, the love of Aphrodite, masters him, and the master is stronger than the servant. And if he conquers the bravest of all the others, he must himself be the bravest. And at the touch of love, everyone becomes a poet, even though he had no music in him before. As to the artists, do we not know that he only whom love inspires has a light of flame? He whom love touches not walks in darkness. Also, the melody of the muses, the metallurgy of Hephaestus, the weaving of Athena, the empire of Zeus over gods and men, are all due to love, who is the inventor of them. And so love set in order the empire of the gods, the love of beauty for which deformity love has no concern. In the days of old, the gods did dreadful things, for they were ruled by necessity. But now, from the birth of love and from the love of the beautiful, has sprung every good in heaven and earth. Therefore, Phaedrus, there comes into my mind a line of poetry which love is said to be the God who gives peace on earth and calms the stormy deep, who stills the winds and bids the sufferer sleep. Love empties men of disaffection and fills them with affection, makes them to meet together at banquets such as these, in sacrifices, feasts, dances. Love is our Lord, the friend of the good, the wonder of the wise, the amazement of the gods. Love is our Lord, parent of delicacy, luxury, desire, fondness, softness, grace, regardful of the good, regardless of the evil. In every word, work, wish, fear Savior, pilot, comrade, helper, glory of the gods and men, leader best and brightest, in whose footsteps let every man follow, sweetly singing in his honor and joining in that sweet strain with which love charms the souls of gods and men. Such is the speech, Phaedrus. Playful, yet having a certain measure of seriousness, which according to my ability, I dedicate to the god.
Tell me, son of Ecumenus, weren't my fears reasonable? Was I not a true prophet when I said that Agathon would make a wonderful oration, that I should be in a fix?
Of the Agathon, true, but not the other part.
Why, my dear friend, must not I or anyone be in a fix who has to speak after he has heard such a rich and varied discourse? Who could listen without amazement? When I reflected on the immeasurable inferiority of my own powers, I am ready to run away for shame, if I could escape. I perceived how foolish I had been and consented to take my turn with you in praising love. For in my simplicity, I imagined that the praise should be true. Whereas I now see that the intention was to attribute to love every imaginable form of praise, and a noble and solemn hymn of praise have you rehearsed. But if you like to hear the truth about love, I am ready to speak in my own manner, though I will not make myself ridiculous by entering into any rivalry with you. Give me permission first to ask Agathon a few more questions.
Ask.
Agathon, I think that you are right in proposing to speak of the nature of love first and afterwards of his works. So, may I ask, is love the love of something or of nothing? Here I must explain myself. I do not want you to say that love is the love of a father or the love of a mother, but to answer as you would if I asked, is a father of something? To which you would find no difficulty in replying, of a son or of a daughter. And that answer would be right.
Very true.
And you would say the same of a mother.
Of course.
Yet, let me ask you one more question in order to illustrate my meaning. Is not a brother to be regarded essentially as a brother of something?
Certainly.
That is, of a brother or sister.
Yes.
And now, I will ask about love. Is love of something or of nothing?
Of something, surely.
Keep in mind what this is, and tell me what I want to know. Whether love desires that which he loves.
Yes, surely.
And does he possess or does he not possess that which he loves and desires?
Probably not.
Isn't the word not probably, but necessarily? He who desires something is in want of something, and he who desires nothing is in want of nothing. Isn't that, Agathon, absolutely and necessarily true? What do you think?
Agreed.
Very good. Would he who is great desire to be great, or he who is strong desire to be strong?
Of course not.
True, for he who is anything cannot want to be that which he is.
Very true.
Yet a man, being strong, desires to be strong, or being swift, desires to be swift, or being healthy, desires to be healthy. But in any case, he seems to desire something which he already has or is. I give the example in order that we may avoid misconception. Who can desire that which he has? Therefore, when a person says, I am well and wish to be well, or I am rich and wish to be rich, and I desire simply to have what I have, to him we shall reply, you, my friend, having wealth and health and strength, want to have the continuance of it. For at this moment, whether you choose or no, you have them. And when you say, I desire that which I already have, is not your meaning that you want to have what you now have in the future? That's what he means, right?
Yes.
He desires that what he has at present be preserved in him in the future, which is equivalent to saying that he desires something which is non-existent to him and which as yet he has not got.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, let me recapitulate the argument. First, is not love of something, and of something too which is wanting to a man?
Yes.
You said that the love of the beautiful set in order the empire of the gods. For that of deformed things there is no love. Did you not say something of that kind?
Yes.
Yes, my friend, and the remark was a just one. And if this is true, love is the love of beauty and not of deformity. And you would agree that love is of something which a man wants and has not. Then love wants and has not beauty.
It follows.
Then would you still say that love is beautiful?
I fear that I did not understand what I was saying.
You made a very good speech, Agathon, but there is yet one small question I have to ask you. Is not the good also the beautiful?
Yes.
Then, in wanting the beautiful, love wants also the good.
I cannot refute you, Socrates. Let us assume that what you are saying is true.
Say, rather, beloved Agathon, that you cannot refute the truth, for Socrates is easily refuted. But let me tell you how I learned so much about love. A tale of love which I heard from Diotima of Mantinea, a woman wise in this and many other kinds of knowledge. She was my instructress in the art of love. Like you, Agathon, I said to her, love was a mighty god and likewise fair. And she proved to me, as I proved to you, that love is neither fair nor good. Here is how she taught me many years ago. What do you mean, Diotima? Is love then evil and foul?
Hush, Socrates. Must that be foul which is not fair?
Certainly. Isn't that which is not wise ignorance?
Do not you see that there is a mean between wisdom and ignorance?
What?
Right opinion. If a man can't give a reason, that is not knowledge. For how can knowledge be devoid of reason? Nor is it exactly ignorance, for ignorance cannot attain the truth. Am I not right in saying that there is a mean between?
Yes.
Do not insist then that what is not fair is necessarily foul, or what is not good evil, or infer that because love is not fair and good, he is therefore foul and evil, for he is a mean between them.
Love is surely admitted by all to be a great God.
By those who know, or by those who do not know?
By all.
And how, Socrates, can love be acknowledged to be a great God by those who say he is not a God at all?
Who denies that love is a God?
You and I are two of them. For you yourself acknowledge that the gods are happy and fair. Would you dare to say that any God was not?
Certainly not.
And you admitted that love, because he was in want, desires those good and fair things of which he is in want. But how can he be a God who doesn't have what is either good or fair?
Impossible.
Then you see that you also deny the divinity of love.
Is love mortal then?
Love is neither mortal nor immortal, but a mean between the two. He is a great spirit, a diamond, and like all spirits, he is intermediate between the divine and the mortal.
And what is his power?
He interprets between gods and men, conveying and taking across to the gods the prayers and sacrifices of men, and to men the commands and replies of the gods. He is the mediator who spans the chasm which divides them, and therefore in him all is bound together. And through him the the arts of the prophet, priest, their sacrifices and mysteries and charms, and all prophecy and incantation find their way. For God mingles not with men. But through love, all intercourse and converse of God with man, whether awake or asleep, is carried on.
And who was his father and his mother?
Now there's a tale. On Aphrodite's birthday, there was a feast of the gods. He, god Poros, or Plenty, who is the son of Metis, or Discretion, was one of the guests. When the feast was over, Penia, or Poverty, came about the doors to beg. Now, Plenty, who was worse for nectar, there was no wine in those days, went into the garden of Zeus and fell into a heavy sleep, and Poverty, considering her own strange circumstances, plotted to have a child by him, and accordingly she lay down at his side and conceived love. He is naturally a lover of the beautiful, and because Aphrodite is herself beautiful, and also because he was born on her birthday, he is her follower and attendant. And as his parentage is, so also are his fortunes. In the first place, he is always poor, rough, squalid. Love has no shoes nor house to dwell in. On the bare earth exposed he lies under the open heavens, in the streets, or the doors of houses taking his rest. Like his mother, he's always in distress. Like his father, too, whom he hardly resembles, he is always plotting against the fair and good. He is bold, enterprising, strong, a mighty hunter, always weaving some intrigue or other, keen in the pursuit of wisdom, fertile in resources, a philosopher at all times, terrible as an enchanter, sorcerer, sophist. Love is by nature neither mortal nor immortal, but alive and flourishing at one moment when he is in plenty, and dead at another moment. But that which is always flowing in is always flowing out. And so he is never in want and never in wealth. And further, he is a mean between ignorance and knowledge. The truth of the matter is this: no god is a philosopher or seeker after wisdom, for he is wise already. Nor does any man who is wise seek after wisdom. Neither do the ignorant seek after wisdom. For herein is the evil of ignorance, that he who is neither good nor wise is nevertheless satisfied with himself. He has no desire for that of which he feels no want.
But who then, Diotima, are the lovers of wisdom, if they are neither the wise nor the foolish?
A child can answer that question. They are those who are in a mean between the two. Love is one of them. For wisdom is a most beautiful thing, and love yearns for the beautiful. And therefore love is also a philosopher, or a lover of wisdom, and being a lover of wisdom is in a mean between the wise and ignorant. And of this too, his birth is the cause. For his father is wealthy and wise, and his mother is poor and foolish. Such, my dear Socrates, is the nature of love. The error in your conception of him was very natural, and as I imagine from what you say, has arisen out of a confusion of love and the beloved, which made you think that love was all beautiful, for the beloved is truly beautiful and delicate, perfect and blessed.
Oh, thou stranger woman, you say well, but what then is the use of love to men?
Socrates, I will try to unfold it to you. You acknowledge that love yearns for the beautiful. But the beautiful in what? Or rather, let me put the question more clearly and ask, when a man loves the beautiful, what does he desire?
That the beautiful may be his.
What does he get by the possession of beauty?
I don't know.
Then let me put the word good in the place of the beautiful and repeat the question once more. If he who loves the good, what is it then that he loves?
The possession of the good.
And what does he gain who possesses the good?
Happiness. I know the answer to that question.
Yes. The happy are made happy by the acquisition of good things. The answer is full and final.
Is this wish and this desire common to all? Do all men always desire their own good, or only some men?
What do you say?
All men. All men desire the good, that they may be happy.
Can you explain in common parlance why we don't say all men love the good, but only some?
I myself wonder why this is.
There's nothing to wonder at. The reason is that one part of love is separated off and receives the name of the whole, but the other parts have other names.
Give me an example.
Consider poetry, which, as you know, is complex and manifold. All creation or passage of non-being into being is poetry or making, and the masters of arts are all poets or makers.
Very true.
Still, all makers are not called poets, but have other names. Only that portion of the art which is concerned with music and meter is called poetry. And they who possess poetry in this sense of the word are called poets. And the same holds for love. All desire of the good and happiness is only the great and subtle power of love. But they who are drawn towards him by any other path, whether money-making or gymnastics or philosophy, are not called lover. The name of the whole is appropriated to those whose affectation takes one form only. They alone are said to love, or to be lovers.
That sounds right.
And you hear people say that lovers are seeking for their other half, but I say that they are seeking neither for the half of themselves nor for the whole, unless the half or the whole will be good also. And they will cut off their hands and feet and cast them away if they are evil. For there is nothing which men love but the good. Is there anything else?
Certainly I should say that there is nothing.
Then the simple truth is that men love the good.
Yes, to which must be added that they love the possession of the good.
And not only the possession, but the everlasting possession of the good. Love is the love of the everlasting possession of the good.
I am not foolish enough to deny it.
Then, if this be the nature of love, what is the manner of the pursuit? What are they doing who show all this eagerness and heat, which is called love? Answer me.
Nay, Diotima, if I had known, I wouldn't have come all this way to learn from you.
They long to give birth and beauty, whether body or soul.
I do not understand.
All men are bringing to birth in their bodies and in their souls. There is a certain age at which human natures desire procreation. Procreation must be in beauty and not deformity. And this procreation is the union of man and woman, and is a divine thing. For conception and generation are an immortal principle in the mortal creature. Beauty, then, is the destiny or goddess of childbirth, and therefore, when approaching beauty, the conceiving power begets and bears fruit. At the sight of ugliness, she frowns, and contracts, and has a sense of pain or turns away and shrivels up, but not without pang. She refrains from conception. And this is the reason why, when the hour of conception arrives and the teeming nature is full, there is such a flutter and ecstasy about beauty, whose approach is the alleviation of the pain and of the birth travail. For love, Socrates, is not as you imagine, the love of the beautiful only.
Well, what then?
The love of generating and giving birth in beauty.
Why?
Because to the mortal creature, generation is a sort of eternity and immortality. And love is of the everlasting possession of the good. All men will necessarily desire immortality together with good. Wherefore, love seeks immortality.
All of this she taught me at various times when she spoke of love. And I remember her once saying to me,
See you not how all the animals and birds, as well as the beasts, in their desire of procreation, are in agony when they take the infection of love, which begins with the desire of union? Whereto is added the care of offspring, on whose behalf the weakest are ready to battle against the strongest, even to the uttermost, and to die for them, and will let themselves be tormented with hunger or suffer anything to maintain their young. Man may be supposed to act thus from reason, but why should animals have these passionate feelings? Can you tell me what?
I don't know.
How would you expect to ever become a master in the art of love if you do not know this?
I beg you, enlighten me.
The mortal nature is seeking as far as is possible to be everlasting and immortal, And this is only to be attained by generation, because generation always leaves behind a new existence in the place of the old. Nay, even in the life of the same individual, there is succession. A man is called the same, and yet in the short interval which elapses between youth and old age, he is undergoing a perpetual process of loss and reparation. Hair, flesh, bones, blood, and the whole body are always changing, which is true not only of the body, but also of the soul, whose habits, tempers, opinions, desires, pleasures, pains, fears, never remain the same in any one of us, but are always coming and going. It is equally true of knowledge, and what is still more surprising to us mortals, not only do the sciences in general spring up and decay, so that in respect of them we are never the same, but each of them individually experiences a like change. For what is implied by the word recollection but the departure of knowledge, which is ever being forgotten and is renewed and preserved by recollection? Not absolutely the same, but by substitution. The old, worn-out mortality, leaving another new and similar memory behind, unlike the divine, which is always the same and not another. And in this way, Socrates, the mortal body, or mortal anything, partakes of immortality, but the immortal in another way. Do not marvel then at the love which all men have of their offspring, for that universal love and interest is for the sake of immortality.
Is this really true, O thou wise Diotima?
Of that, Socrates, you may be assured. Think only of the ambition of men, and you will wonder at the senselessness of their ways, unless you consider how they are stirred by the love of immortality of faith. They are ready to run all risks greater far than they would have run for their children, and to spend money and undergo any sort of toil, and even to die, for the sake of leaving behind them a name which will be eternal. Do you imagine that Alcestis would have died to save Admetus, or Achilles to avenge Patroclus, had they not imagined that the memory of their virtues, which still survives among us, would be immortal? Those who are pregnant in body betake themselves to women, or beget children. But souls which are pregnant conceive that which is proper for the soul to conceive. And what are these soul conceptions? First, wisdom and virtue. Then such creators, poets, and all artists who are deserving of the name inventor. But the greatest and fairest sort of wisdom is by far that which is concerned with the ordering of states and families, and which is called temperance and justice. And he who in youth has the seed of these implanted in him, and is himself inspired, when he comes to maturity, desires to beget and generate. He wanders about seeking beauty, and that he may beget offspring. For in deformity he will beget nothing, and naturally embraces the beautiful rather than the deformed body. Who then, when he thinks of Homer and Hesiod and the other great poets, would not rather have their children than ordinary human ones? These are the lesser mysteries of love into which even you, Socrates, may enter. To the greater and more hidden ones, which are the crowns of these, and to which, if you pursue them in a right spirit, they will lead, I know not whether you will be able to attain. But I will do my utmost to enlighten you, and do follow if you can.
I am all ears.
To learn the mysteries of love, a young man should begin with visiting beautiful forms. At first, love one such form only. Out of that he should create fair thoughts, and soon he will of himself perceive that the beauty of one form is akin to the beauty of another, and that if beauty of form in general is his pursuit, how foolish would he be not to recognize that beauty in every form is, and it will always be the same. And when he perceives this, he will abate his violent love of the one, which he will despise and do the small thing, and he will become a lover of all beautiful forms. And the next stage, he will consider that the beauty of the mind is more honorable than the beauty of the outward form, so that if a virtuous soul have but little comeliness, he will be content to love and tend him, and will search out and bring to birth thoughts which may improve the young until he is compelled to contemplate and see the beauty of institutions and laws, and to understand that the beauty of them is all of one family, and that personal beauty is a trifle. And after laws and institutions, he will go on to the sciences, that he may say their beauty, being not like a servant in love with the beauty of one youth or man or institution, himself a slave, mean and narrow-minded, but drawing towards and contemplating the vast sea of beauty, he will create many fair and noble thoughts and notions and boundless love of wisdom, until on that shore he grows and waxes strong. And at last the vision is revealed to him of a single science, which is the science of beauty everywhere. He who walks this path, who has learned to see the beautiful in due order and succession, when he comes toward the end, will suddenly perceive a nature of wondrous beauty. And this, Socrates, is the final cause of all our former toils. A nature which is, in the first place, everlasting, not growing and decaying or waxing and waning. Secondly, not fair in one point of view and foul in another, or at one time or in one relation, or at one place fair and at another time or another relation or another place foul, as if fair to some, foul to others, but beauty absolute, separate, simple, and everlasting, which without diminution and without increase or any change is imparted to the ever-growing and perishing beauties of all other things. He who from these, ascending under the influence of true love, begins to perceive that beauty, which is not far from the end, and the true order of going or being led by another to the things of love, is to begin from the beauties of earth and mount upwards for the sake of that other beauty, using these as steps only, and from one going on to two, and from two on to all fair forms, and from fair forms to practices, and from fair practices to fair notions, until from fair notions he arrives at the notion of absolute beauty, and at last knows what the essence of beauty is. The contemplation of beauty absolute, my dear Socrates, a beauty which, if you once beheld, you would see not to be after gold, garments, and fair boys and youths whose presence now entrances you. But what if man had eyes to see the true beauty, the divine beauty, I mean, pure and clear and unalloyed, not clogged with the pollutions of mortality and all the colors and vanities of human life? Look and converse with the true beauty, simple and divine. Remember how in that communion only, beholding beauty with the eye of the mind, he will be enabled to bring forth not images of beauty, but realities. For he is not hold of an image, but of a reality, and bringing forth and nourishing true virtue to become the friend of God and be immortal, if mortal man may. Would that be an ignoble life?
Such, Phaedrus, were the words of Diotima, and I am persuaded of their truth. In being persuaded of them, I try to persuade others, that in the attainment of this end, human nature will not easily find a helper better than love. And therefore also I say that every man ought to honor him as I myself honor him, and walk in his ways, and exhort others to do the same, and praise the power and spirit of love, according to the measure of my ability, now and forever. The words which I have spoken to you, Phaedrus, may be called an encomium of love, or anything else which you please.
Where is Agathon? Lead me to Agathon. Hail, friends! Will you have a very drunken man as a companion to your revels? Or shall I crown Agathon, which was my intention of coming, and go away? For I was unable to come yesterday, and therefore I am here today, carrying on my head this crown, and taking them from my own head, I may crown the head of this fairest and wisest of men. Will you laugh at me because I'm drunk? Yet I know very well that I am speaking the truth, although you may laugh. But first tell me, will you drink with me, Evelina?
Aye.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you for participating. Before you go, maybe we're going to open up the conversation now, and I'll participate in this dinner party. There's some nice wine in the back. There's no compulsion in drinking, however, tonight.
Not part of the party.
I thought maybe I'd start with our readers. Is there one or two of you who'd like to comment on what it was like and what you learned from that? Well, what struck you about this experience? Who wants to go first? Nobody wants to?
Well, I want to talk a little bit about Aristophanes, the reason I play him the way I do. I think he's being very sarcastic in what he's saying. And you know, if you read some of his plays, you know that he's against the empire, he's against the war. He has nothing but contempt for the generals and the politicians. Hence the line about, you know, they're all, you know, and that's how I wanted to play him. And I threw in, you know, I made a few changes because Jowett's text does not really convey much humor.
No, you did a great job in that. I will tell you, though, that I first learned this hiccup cure at college at Yale. I did not know it came from the Symposium. What's in the actual text is if you take a spoon and you put it on your nose in a glass of water and drink from the water, it really, really does work. So, I'll just say.
I didn't really have the hiccups.
I know, better than take one of your nose. There's a great cure for hiccups.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Does anyone else want to? Go ahead.
So one thing I found interesting was, like, for the case of Mr. Duncan, who were you playing? Would you like a favorite?
I'll say this. I was the last minute addition, by the way.
You have someone who says something completely wrong at the beginning, but at the end has very good observations about what love is and how you have to go into virtue to be able to actually love. And you find that a lot in Plato and Socrates and Aristotle, where you talk to someone and they're completely wrong, and they're also completely right at the same time. I just thought that was really
That's really interesting. I was very struck hearing it this time. And it's one of the things the early and later Christian philosophers were so struck by Plato, is that the description of the two loves is not in which, you know, Socrates tries to demolish, but it keeps coming back to us because it's based on something real, which is the experience of erotic or romantic love seems to lead both to heights and to degradation, right? And there's the great poem by St. Paul in the New Testament to agape, which is, you know, the Christian conception of sacrificial love. And it compares, you know, it really compares eros and distinguishes agape from eros. And yet it leaves this problem, which St. Pope John Paul II then, you know, it's a problem in lived life and it's a problem in church thought, which is if agape is all that is noble and sacrificing, in what sense is the lesser love still a love at all, right? And I don't propose we can answer it, but I really spent some time listening to that speech thinking about the two loves and that puzzle that we are living out of how romantic love leads us to what is both highest and what is sometimes, at least a related love, sense of a desire, extremely degrading.
Well, C.S. Lewis has four loves.
Yes.
And that book really does address the question you're raising, and very well.
You want to give us the short answer?
You want a copy of my sophomore essay? But no, I think one of the points I can mention, I can remember it well, is it's the idea that, you know, the three loves below agape do have, they can be misdirected. And the fourth love redirects each to the proper, to its proper object and in the best possible way.
And they're only complete and full if they're all intertwined as well.
You've read it too.
Okay.
You need
Did
to
you
go.
Well, I would say I think the interesting thing for me in doing this, so, you know, reading this beforehand, you can just sit down and read it, right? I found, especially kind of in this last bit when we're actually, everything's coming together, that I was able to follow the argument a lot better than when I'm just sitting down and reading it, which lets me make a bunch of notes here on my page as I'm listening. But following the argument of kind of this process of, you know, the idea of starting with poetry, and poetry is a passage from non-being into being, which would be very familiar language to Christians, passage from non-being to being. And in poetry, it comes from a maker, who is what makes something go from non-being into being. And that through this, and as a result of this non-being into being, there's something in us that which causes us to seek immortality. And so there's the lower immortality, which is the passing on of generations, which is a good. And there's the higher immortality, which is the passing, which is the kind of the work of the soul. And then it walks you straight through. You know, first you see a whole bunch of beautiful things, and then from beautiful things you get to a bunch of forms, and then from forms you learn about beauty itself. Well, then you learn about the beauty of the body, and the beauty of the soul, and the beauty of institutions, and finally, you know, that which is beauty itself. And so it's a lot easier for me to follow as a performance than it was as a reading an essay. And so that was the part that really finally made it like, hey, this all fits together for me now.
I found that myself. I had read the Symposium before I wrote my first book, which is called Enemies of Eros, How the Sexual Revolution Killed Family, Marriage, and Love. So I was quite struck by the Symposium. But I keep hearing, every time we do this, in this format, I hear new things, and I'm glad you had the experience too.
I was going to say, I'm a high school teacher, so I notice in public forum, and I can see where it comes from in schools, the idea of starting with a premise that leads to some logical conclusion, because so many of my students want to argue out of emotion, out of anything else other than, you know, where is this logically going? You know, what does this mean really? And so it's, you know, I can see that the adults that I can see in the world, a lot of them have been neglected in that area. And, you know, a lot of my students have no idea.
Well, you should try this with them sometime.
I do. But not this. I teach math. So I like the in-between, right? Fractions, giving equal elements. Not all good, or all that. You know, in some areas there are some fractions.
Thank you. I want to let Socrates in and then.
No, sure. So, you know, Augustine picks up on this later, that what I think Socrates is trying to say is that love, which we tend to objectify, you know, put a big L in front of it and talk about it in our culture, etc. It's nothing at all, really. It's just a state of restlessness. It's a state of in-betweenness, of seeking, of incompleteness, a feeling that things aren't what they're supposed to be. And so we tend to want, and go. And it's only when you find that God is the center do all of the other desires become ordered. Right? Because they all become, oh, now I see where it was all heading towards. Otherwise, it tends to go in circles. It tends to just go in circles. And so it's exactly the same situation here as it is for Augustine, right? In his discussion with that.
All right, let's open it up to the rest of the philosophers in the room. Is there anyone who has like any thoughts? Go ahead.
I was struck by, you know, God created with male and female, you know, in Genesis. And men sitting around drinking and trying to capture the essence of love fail because it's partial. And a woman comes in and brings a different kind of beauty and a different kind of thought to it. And together we get a better picture of love.
That's really interesting because I remember a friend of mine noting for me that Socrates says everything I learned about love I learned from a woman.
Yeah.
For a man in ancient Greece was really quite significant. So
But all the oracles were women.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
I used to be very frustrated in high school reading Plato, and I understand he talks about very abstract and important ideas, but I found them very imprecise. So like love, now that I've had the advantage of studying philosophy and psychology in St. Thomas, we can define love as being passion, which is a quality of the human being, and it is the passion with respect to how he almost said it's the approach of good or the possession of good. So he had a lot of diffuse ideas, but I found Plato was still very obscure, and until Aristotle came along in St. Thomas.
Oh, thank you, thank you. So, does anyone can relate anything they heard here to their personal struggles with the problem of love everlasting? Go ahead, thanks.
So, this is a really personal thing, but I live with roommates, a married couple. They're not Christian, and I've lived there for about a year, and I just found out that they practice polyamory, which is a huge shock to me, and I'm still coping with it. It's fresh news. I haven't spoken to my priest, so I'm trying to understand what is this. Well, I mean, it sounds like this is something that maybe we can think about philosophically and also more concretely in the human experience, and so from a philosophic perspective as well as a Christian perspective.
So tell me a little bit about, obviously it's a sinful thing, and that's disturbing, but is there another level at which you found being confronted with a practicing and ideologically affirmative? So the difference between polyamory and adultery, I mean, it is adultery, but it's consensual adultery with an idea that this is a good, to share your body with people other than your partner. Just help us wrestle one level deeper with why that's disturbing.
That's a good question. I was disappointed. I mean, even though they're not Christian, I mean, they still seem to have this bond and a love. And then I just was so disappointed, like they have a child together too. And to think that their love was not full and complete and everlasting, it's like they just willfully let it degrade. It's disturbing and heartbreaking for me.
Yeah, it requires, I mean, a kind of, I've been thinking a lot about the role of the body in human experience and in Christian thought, so we often, it's a kind of neglected part of the creed, but we are awaiting the resurrection of the dead, and we're not going to exist in heaven indefinitely. We're going to get an unbodied soul. We're going to get bodies back, perfected bodies, right? Which means that our true selves are a body and a soul, right? And so one of the puzzles in the modern life is what is the meaning of this bodily union, right? And when you share it with others, there's something that seems to be, if you have a vision of this union as exemplifying love, something that's degrading about using the body in other ways. Is that part of what you're thinking about in terms of what, I'm just reporting what I have thought about, that we want the body to mean something, and we want our love to mean something, and we want our love to be embodied, right? And so this decision to say that the sexual act has no particular intrinsic meaning to love is a really consequential thing to decide about your own body. I don't know if anyone else can, but that's one of the things. The desire to generate and give birth in beauty is some beautiful language that he gives, where it's a desire to experience yourself and as an embodied person, and the body as meaningful and creative, right, in the next. So I don't know. That's just some of the things that what you said, and thank you for sharing that. Anyone else have something they want to pop in with?
Well, St. Paul has something to say about joining bodies, you know, and as Christians, we look to him, and you know, the two become one flesh. So if he says, don't go with the harlots, don't, you know, I mean, there's something.
Well, he also says basically that you're a temple of Christ, right? So you're joining the temple, you know, you're degrading the body of Christ, really.
Not just yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, but you know, that's true. But underlying that as well is a psychological experience, right? So because she mentioned that. So why is it disturbing? It's not just disturbing because it's wrong, although it is very wrong. It's violating of something deep in the idea that love is the foundation of the universe, I think.
I feel like the child has an important part too, because as he talked about with love and the child representing the best, hopefully, of both of the parents, and how important that is, you know, that plays into that as well, because that's the next stage of that, you know, development, and that's representation of that. And it's almost even more serious because of the child, in the sense that the child is not part of the other parties, it's part of those two parents only.
Right. Right. And, you know, I have my doubts about how well this is going to work out over the long run for keeping a family together for a child. But I'm sure you do too, right? It's people think they get to remake things from the ground up, and now we find out otherwise. Oh yeah, please. Yes.
You're just thinking about polarity, and to your point, you know, Paul's second theology of the body, he speaks of this totality of the gift. You know, I was a chastity speaker for a year in LA, and one of the things I would always ask the young people when I was speaking with them, these teens, is can you give 100% of yourself to more than one person? I mean, this is basically math. You know, it's, if you will, the mathematics of the person, to use kind of a weird analogy, because we're not meant, like, it's just, that's not how love works. It's the very fabric of gift, is here's 50% of me to you, and 25% of me to you, and I can talk to you on Monday night, but I have this on Tuesday. You know, there's just that's the kind of a rationing of love, which contradicts the nature of love, its totality. So I think that's one thought. And then I was thinking about Eros and Agape, and Pope Benedict XVI in God is Love, you know, he has then that initial part of the encyclical kind of enters into that discussion about Eros and Agape, and about the Greeks, and how they say, let us submit to love, you know, this kind of this sense of that love conquers all. And then he says that Eros promises what Eros can't give. Yeah. You know, that we're longing for something more than just this bodily experience, but something that Agape can give. So it's kind of like beautifully interconnected in a way. One leads to the other. So, yeah, thoughts?
Since we're talking about marriage and children, I've been working with Bill May, who recently died, in his Catholics for the Common Good, and he had a number of very pithy observations. He says that when a man and a woman have a child, they make themselves irreproducible with each other and with the child. That they are forever, the child is forever evidence that they have existed, and they can't be replaced no matter how many other relationships there are.
That's really interesting. Thank you. You started to raise your hand.
Sort of, tighten some of that, and then also just interesting here. You know, one of the things that Diablo mentioned was the notion that love is the mediator between God and man. And then going back to the notion of, you know, talking about the generation, you know, one of the images that sometimes we use of the Holy Spirit is that, you know, the love of the Father and the love of the Son is so strong that it becomes, you know, the third person of the Trinity. And the image that we often use of the Trinity, the Holy Spirit, is that the Spirit is kind of the mediator between God and man, as you know, Jesus sends that to be with us. continue as our mediator. And it's interesting just to kind of see, that if, again, which one of the reasons Christians love Plato so much is they can read it and they can very easily take what Plato's saying and say, well, actually, that's kind of what we're doing, and repurpose Plato into this notion of well, yeah, we could fit that into this.
It was very influential in a lot of ways. I mean, one of the things which the poet and Professor James Matthew Wilson, he wrote a book called Division of the Soul, the True, the Good, and the Beautiful in the Western Tradition, which I was reading this morning. And he, and C.S. Lewis has written about this too. The idea that no one, every man, without exception, desires what he perceives to be good. It's a controversial proposition in some ways, but let's say, the Augustinian conception that radical evil in humans, that the essence of evil is its disorder of goods. That evil is not capable of creating that which is desire. So let's pause on that a moment and see if anyone wants to contest what is laid out here, which is every man without exception desires to possess the good. Anyone want to think about that at all? Yeah. No. Just wait 1 second, because I know you've spoken a couple times, and I just want somebody else leap in here and say something dumb. I want you to say something dumb. Come on, say something honest. What do you think about that idea?
Just like Patriots. You're the first one to say it. Everyone else just,
Contribute to the conversation. We're not here to be brilliant. Nobody? All right, so we'll
Let him have his say.
The second thing that struck me, though, the flaw in the argument that Socrates presents, which is, from a Christian perspective, that every desire, that love and desire is a desire for something that you don't have. What's the flaw in that argument from our perspective?
Well, you see, that I was just a few minutes ago that I was thinking to myself, when is Diogenes speaking of love and when is she speaking of desire? Desire has to be of what you don't have, at least in some respect.
Love is the desire for the good, though. So that's the definition proposed. So that could be one flaw. Maybe that's not what the good is. Well, that's not what love is.
Well, desire is what motivates action. And everything we desire under an aspect through which it is seen as good, even if it is in fact bad. We see, Eve saw that the apple was good to eat. I don't know. I guess I don't know what I'm saying in terms of your question. I'm not sure that I understand your question. It seems to me like, though, it's not complicated. That we desire everything that we desire in the aspect of the good, and therefore love is in some way involved in that. Possession of the good, though, also allows love to continue. There may not be any desire, but there can still be love. Although sometimes, you come into possession of the good and then you get tired of it or whatever, because we're changeable. We're changeable.
Yes, it's everlasting.
But no, I'm not talking about capital G good. I'm just talking about, various goods. We are changeable. But when we're in possession of it, we still love it, don't we? I mean, that doesn't seem to get touched on.
The definition of love as you can only love what you don't have, and therefore the God of love is not great, but impoverished, the child of want and plenty. It would imply, and they say explicitly, that the gods aren't lovers because they possess the good, right?
Well, remind me who's saying that, though?
Socrates and Socrates through the Endiatma.
I don't see the error in the argument, though. I mean, the reason Diogenes brings up recollection because that's the Platonic notion of anamnesis, right? That somehow we were with God. You know, the myth goes in the Republic, we were with God, we fell from God, we have some kind of remembrance of Him, right? And Augustine picks this up as well. And we have some, and that is the nature of the restlessness. That's the nature of the desire, right? And the not knowing what to do with ourselves, etc. And I think that's exactly what Diotima is describing, is that same restlessness.
Yeah, I agree. I guess I'm not.
And so it's an in-between.
But if God is love, as we say, then he who possesses the good, who is the good, is capable of loving.
Right, but there's also a discussion about...
Not the human being.
There's
the
also
fact
discussion.
that God is perfect and yet loves is a big rock thrown into the Platonic discussion of love. I'm just...
Fair enough. And so Augustine, so the question to Augustine is put, why would God create us at all? He's perfect. Why would he need us?
Yeah.
Right? And so his answer is God creates us for our sake, for his sake. And it's just a sharing. That's all it is.
Right, and that, okay, I'm sorry, go ahead. Come on, Diotima, tell us.
So I'm in grad school right now, I'm reading The Republic. And not to get too deep into The Republic in case people haven't read it, but this and the Symposium together just really illustrated to me the innate desire in humans to define God. And I really feel like that's what Socrates and Plato are attempting to do, but fall short of because they're in a pre-Christ world. So they can't find the correct definition because they don't have the fulfillment of the answer yet. And I think it's such a beautiful foundation for Western civilization that so many people are lacking, because you need to see where the arguments came from in order to see the beauty of the fulfillment in Christ. So I don't see it as like a flaw in his argument as much as an open-ended question. This is how far I can get.
I completely agree.
and as far as you can get is to glimpse the form of beauty.
Yeah,
right?
like in the Republic, he never gets to define goodness.
Right.
He makes an image of it by comparing it to the sun, but he can never say what goodness is.
Yeah, I think the other struggle here in this argument is that it doesn't acknowledge of degrees, and that it's either you have attained the good or you've not attained the good, as opposed to, kind of progressive. From Aristotle and then through Aquinas, we have the notion of that you grow in virtue, right? So it isn't a matter of I'm not virtuous, suddenly I'm virtuous, and but you're continually growing in virtue. So you are attaining the good, not in a leap and a bound, but over time, progressively. So you as the way you develop goodness as a virtue is you start having practices, and the practices lead to habits, and the habits lead to virtue. And so over time you are, and as you have certain practices and they become habits, now you are more desiring of continuing to do those things, which is what eventually leads you to becoming virtuous. So basically, as you gain some of the good, you then desire more of the good. And so you are progressively, it isn't the sort of thing where I don't have any good, all of a sudden, boom, I've got the good. But there's this progressive nature of journeying towards the good along the way. So at the same time of, I desire that which I don't have. I recognize that I do not yet have the fullness of the good. But I also, the reason that I'm continuing to do this, one of the things that helps me journey towards the good is the fact that I am, in Christians we say we have grace along the way that's helping us desire the good more and more. The closer we get, the more and more we desire it. And so we're actually increasing this desire, strangely, as we increase in goodness, not decreasing in desire, because there's only a little bit of goodness left to have.
I want to bring up something with some trepidation, but I think we do have to look at the cosmology, Socrates' cosmology, Plato's cosmology versus Aristotle's, because, and you hinted at this when you talked about how we have this remembrance of God or what have you. I mean, for Plato, creation was a mistake. Creation as we understand it, you know, of the creation, that there is a material world and that we inhabit it and so on. This is a tragedy. And yeah, it is. And it certainly became that with the later Neoplatonists. His problem is it's because of this. I'm not saying the idea is fully formed, but it's because of this that you have all of a sudden you get the Enlightenment. All of a sudden you come out of the cave and you get the Enlightenment and you achieve virtue, just what Everett's talking about here. Whereas for Aristotle, it is a different thing, you know, because he doesn't have this concept of the material world as being a failing. God created it. He holds it in existence through his creative power. It is the way it is because of his choice, which, as a Dominican I knew once pointed out to me, is almost like saying that God is love, since the principle of choice is love. So Aristotle's cosmology is very different.
I don't think Aristotle's cosmology implies any choice on God's part.
Because things are one way and not another. It's really that simple.
And yet,
nothing more than that, but it still does suggest God wanted this universe, not that one, because that's the one he loved. It suggests that. He doesn't say that. We put that into it. I admit that.
The reason, though, so many of the early Christian thinkers were drawn to Plato is because of the doctrine of the fall. And because of the problem, we believe that God made the world and created it good, and yet evil is you know, to reason, omnipresent, and we achieve perfection almost never, or never in this life, right? So whatever we try, we're going to fail at in the complete sense, and so I think they saw what you're describing as a kind of a radical evil cosmology. They saw as an early intimation of the idea of the fall. You know, St. Paul uses the same language. What we see now, we see through a glass darkly, right? But when we're in heaven, we will see clearly what we can only see through a glass darkly. So I hesitate to get into the great debate between Aristotle and Plato, but I do think there's a reason why there was a lot of early Christian Platonism.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. What about this idea? Okay, let me throw this out for anyone, preferably for someone who hasn't spoken, to just blurt out a thought. What about the idea that the desire for the good is a desire to possess the good? To possess, emphasis on the verb. That love is the desire to possess the good. Does that ring true with your experience of what love is?
To be united with the good.
Union with the good, yes. Tell me why you prefer it that way.
Because I think that's where we're going, what we're supposed to be doing. We get to now, we can, and when we get to heaven, it'll be union, not your mind, it's one.
So both are joining together. That's the difference. It's not one possessing the other. Or we're being possessed by God, maybe ultimately, but he knows how to do it. Yes?
The play deals with desire, and so we're talking about desire. Desire to me is a feeling, and it doesn't line up with something that has been more recently brought up in the last 10 years that I, in my awareness. Something that St. Thomas said, Aristotle apparently said, and Bishop Robert Barron's kind of enhances it. To will the good of another, Barron says, as other. To will is an action. It's independent of feeling, and feelings get in the way of love many times. So I'm not sure how that jives with Aristotle and what we're talking about right now.
Well, see, if that's an interesting point and probably worth a whole bunch of discussion on its own. But you've actually also hit the other point that I was thinking of, which is, in really to love is to desire that the good exists prior to desiring to possess it of oneself. In other words, even if I can't possess a good, to love that good is to desire its well-being and its existence at the, you know, at the bottom level is to, and what I'm calling love, you might call will. That's another whole rich discussion. But you're right. I think there's something to me troubling about the essence of love being the personal possession of the good, and that in our everyday lived experience, and I think we may be back to the Eros Agape puzzle, like how is it when what you desire is something good for yourself, how is that love? But if what you desire for yourself is God, that has to be good. So I find it a puzzle I don't have a big answer to, but the question of the will is a really big one. We're almost to 9, and I'm wondering, Phil, if you want to take us out, if you have a few last thoughts, or if you want to sum us up. Come on, man.
Yeah, just a blackboard. Just a couple last thoughts. Again, I'm the Dean of Academics here. When I was a kid, I loved the Lives of the Saints, but I always had difficulty with St. Francis because I was horrified at the notion of begging for stuff. And then I entered into administration at a Catholic school.
I knew there was some use to that.
So I'm getting used to that. But just a few words about the school and you know what you experienced here today from the Benedict XVI Institute, this beautiful seminar-style format, is something that we are trying to do here at the school, and you know, other schools, Catholic schools across the country, some are also trying to do this. It's very important. Even teaching students to pause and ask questions. Like, we're leaving this evening, you may not all have a clear understanding of exactly what love is, right? But maybe even just gain an understanding that you don't quite have that understanding is an improvement, you know? And that alone is a good, like, I have noticed over the years my students are always very litigious. They're defenders of their rights. And so some years ago I started asking, on occasion I still do this, all right, well I'm violating your right to my homework assignment. Very well, well I'll waive the assignment if you can tell me what a right is. They'll usually take the option. I had one student spend 4 hours, and then she deduced that she really couldn't figure it out. You know, it's important even to reflect on those terms we use all the time, justice, right, which is the purpose of Plato's Republic. That's how that begins, with the desire to define justice. These are terms we use all the time. Yet as a country, we're not training our youth or even ourselves to pause and actually consider what they actually mean. And that is something that we're trying to do here. So, and it's worthwhile. We're also, like today, experiencing, like many Catholic schools, you're probably hearing about this, we have a lot of interest, and the interest doesn't have a lot of money any longer. And with the housing crisis in California as bad as it is, people don't have disposable income to help to pay for their children to go to school. And I can guarantee you the public schools, some of them are great, but they're not doing this. And they don't want to do this, which we should ask why. You know, why do they not want to train our future to think independently and to think clearly? So if you're able to help us out a little, it's always nice even to defray some of the costs for the evening, but be generous. I'm done begging.
Oh, thank you. And just 30 more seconds. What we're doing, training thinkers, is really important. But truth and goodness and beauty are the three faces of God. So what we're doing in thinking about or experiencing beauty, or we're cultivating our own souls to experience the presence of God. And I really salute what all of you for being here. Holy Trinity, thank you. Thanks to Archbishop Valladolid. And let's go have some more cheese.
And thank you, Maggie.